Christianity emerged in the Roman Empire and spread rapidly in 1st century AD. From the death of Jesus to the legislation of Christianity in 313 AD, this new religion affected the Roman Empire in various ways, and in this video we will be discussing how did Christianity reflected in art and architecture in the Roman Empire. To explain the early Christian art, we must first understand the importance of visual representation in the Roman society. Because in a society where the majority of the people were illiterate, art was the way of effective communication. Therefore, it can be said that Christians, who was a part of this society, also gave huge importance to art. Early Christians used symbols to tell their story and show their faith. Most of the early Christian iconography was derived from the pre-existing Greco-Roman culture. Symbols such as fish and dove was used by the pagan Romans and later adapted by Christians. The symbol of fish was used frequently in the Roman Empire, especially on floor mosaics, as it was representing purity. Christians also adapted this figure, since it can be linked back to the story of the feeding of the 5,000, where Jesus Christ fed 5,000 people only with one fish and one bread. Christians in the years of persecution hanged the symbol of fish to their doors to represent their faith secretly, and they didn't avoid boredom. Symbol of dove was linked to Greek goddess Aphrodite, and it was symbolizing affection. While in today, Christians still use this symbol as a sign of peace, referring to the story of Moses in Genesis 8, 10, 11.
To understand why the cross became such a powerful symbol in Christianity, we must begin with its significance in Rome. The cross was merely a tool for torture and execution in ancient Rome. It was not a religious symbol. To put it another way, it represented pain, humiliation, and shame for society. For this reason, early Christians did not accept the cross right away. The cross was a symbol of death rather than salvation for people in that time period. Over time, Christian communities began to interpret the symbol differently, making it central to their faith. The cross became a symbol of Jesus' victory over death, his resurrection, and humanity's promised salvation rather than just a reminder of a scene of execution. That is, the symbol's meaning entirely shifted to convey the idea that death was a beginning rather than an end. The artists of the time were also impacted by this change in meaning. They decided to highlight the divine intent behind the cross rather than its physical suffering. Therefore, rather than merely acting as a torture stake, the cross becomes the center of divine light and salvation in artistic creations. In other words, the cross changes from being a symbol of suffering to one of triumph. Thus, it starts to show up frequently in liturgy, architecture, and everyday religious activities. As a result, the cross was taken out of Rome dehumanizing culture of execution and placed at the core of Christian identity. It came to represent salvation from death rather than death. Similar to the cross, the crown of thorns was considered a purely dehumanizing object during the Roman era. Soldiers placed it on Jesus' head to mock his claim to be the king of the Jews. Therefore, its original meaning was a tool of humiliation rather than torture or even punishment. In addition to causing physical discomfort, the crown's sharp branches heightened the feeling of ridicule. However, by making it the center of its theology, Christianity fundamentally altered the meaning of this object, just as it did with the cross. Instead of being a joke, the crown of thorns was now understood to symbolize Jesus' real kingship and spiritual authority. In other words, something that was meant to be diminished eventually became a potent symbol for the idea of kingship or divine kingship. Christianity emphasizes that what may appear to be a weakness or suffering on the outside has a higher purpose. Therefore, the crown of thorns represents the significance inherent in suffering rather than the actual pain. It is therefore among the most potent components of Christian symbolism. The crown of thorns has lost all of its original meanings of dishonor and pain and is now a symbol of honor, kingship, and spiritual power in Christian art and the world of faith. Christianity turned these two things from symbols of pain into symbols of victory over evil.
Early Christians in the Roman Empire faced severe persecution and danger while practicing their faith. They were constantly monitored and punished. This situation forced them to conduct their worship in secret, out of sight, and often in catacombs, which were underground burial tunnels. These areas were not actually designed as temples. Their purpose was to be a secret and safe place where worship could be performed away from the public eye. However, as the Christian population increased, these places started to become insufficient, which in turn heightened the need for their own private and permanent places of worship, where they could practice their religion comfortably and regularly. The existing Roman temples were not suitable for Christian worship. Their architectural layouts and symbolic functions were structured according to pagan rituals. Therefore, they were incompatible with Christian worship, both structurally and in meaning. A major turning point came in 313 when Emperor Constantine issued the Edict of Milan. Thanks to this decision, Christianity became a legal religion across the Roman Empire. This political change immediately influenced the architectural development of Christian communities. Since persecution had ended, they no longer needed to hide. They were able to build large and visible worship areas. This shift launched a new architectural era that allowed the religion to be visibly represented within the urban landscape. Under Constantine's patronage, the basilica was adopted as the primary model for Christian worship. Basilicas were structures in Rome previously used as marketplaces, law courts, and public assembly halls. Their spacious and large interior design immediately made them ideal for accommodating sizable Christian congregations. Furthermore, the basilica's long shape worked very well with the order of Christian services. Because of these things, the basilica became the main basic design for early church buildings. As the architectural transformation continued, Constantine ordered the construction of monumental basilicas over the tombs of important Christian leaders, most notably St. Peter and St. Paul. In this way, these structures became more than just places of worship. They also turned into major pilgrimage centers. Because of this, Christianity became more visible and more accepted in society. With these developments, Christian worship moved from hidden underground spaces to large public buildings located in the centers of cities. This architectural transformation reflected the shift in Christianity's place in society. It had moved from being a persecuted minority to an accepted and increasingly influential religion. Throughout this period, art and architecture played a major role in shaping the religion's identity. They offered a recognizable visual identity to Christians and provided them with safe, structured spaces where they could gather openly and participate in communal worship. The legalization of Christianity led to emergence of these monumental structures, which symbolized both the freedom gained and the unity of the congregation. The architectural developments of the early Christian period show how the religion evolved not just in terms of belief and practice, but also in the physical environments it inhabited. These changes marked the great transformation in how Christianity positioned itself within the Roman Empire, indicating the beginning of a new cultural and social era for its followers. Thank you for listening.